Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the Markets Wiki Education history-focused video series and more.
By sheer accident, I had just finished working at University College in London in the bursars department. So I was doing admin for the summer of 1975. And I needed to do some work because my chosen career path was on hold because I was awaiting an interview time or date from the Admiralty because I was going to become a helicopter pilot in the Royal Navy. But no interview, and I needed to get out of the house. My chosen path was to live in London while I waited for the interview, so I had to pay the rent. And my mother said, "Oh, here's an ad, commodity broker seeks office junior." And I thought, oh God. So to humor her, I wrote out an application, sent it in, and lo and behold, I won the role of being the back office junior in a sugar broker, actually one of the bigger sugar brokers in London, as it turns out, where within a short period of time, I was running the back office, and I was still 18 at the time. I learned how to trade sugar after hours when I was still 18. I was a broker. I would make markets. There would be an interest to buy and an interest to sell. And I would then phone around 20 or 30 dealers and find the other players and narrow the markets up and get some trades done. So that was my first experience of trading. So I ran Confin, which is now Suchden's back office, from 75, late 75 until late 81. And it was great fun because I also got some stints on sugar on the floor, learning how to trade open outcry London style, which was much more of a ring setup. And I also spent time similarly on cocoa. And also I was on the opening day on the IPE, when the IPE was launched in London. And so in late 81, my boss, Derek Whiting, asked me into his office and said, "Alex, I've got an interesting thing for you." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "I'm going to second you to this outfit that's going to launch a financial futures market, LIFE, London International Financial Futures Exchange." Oh, okay. So what does that mean? I joined the marketing team at LIFE, where I was given the brief to try and educate the stodgy city of London in what financial futures were. And as part of that project, I met some very interesting people and did some interesting projects, including developing a simulated trading program. So people would learn how to place orders and see their trades, how to monitor trades on screens. And I think I was the first person to successfully encourage Reuters to open an API so that we could take money market data, run it through a forward calculator, and present it as futures data. So we had screens displaying Eurodollar futures and short sterling futures in the summer of 1982. And as part of that training marketing program, I was also involved in some open outcry training. And I had the privilege in those days of working with quite some geniuses, amongst whom was David Kite, who came from the London Stock Exchange as a clerk to come and work for us in Confin. And a few others. And we all took part in simulated trading on a dummy pit in somebody's office building while they were busy building out the Royal Exchange for the LIFE floor. So that was my step into being on the floor in September 82 for day one of LIFE. I was greeted on my first day with probably 30 or 40 boxes of IBM punch cards. And my job was to figure out a way to file all of these punch cards, and they only represented a week of trading for my brokerage company. We were talking tens of thousands of punch cards. And the last thing I wanted to do was spend my life filing punch cards. So the first thing I did was figure out where they came from. I discovered that each punch card represented one contract. So within a week, I'd organized it that the clearinghouse would no longer send me a single punch card per contract, but a multi-lot card. And I stopped becoming a filing clerk after a week or 10 days and started to focus on using that brand new, what they call broker's package system, to be able to discover how to manage the daily out trades. My job was to sign and verify the daily dealing statement that we got from the clearinghouse. And I needed to close out any outstanding mistrades or mismatches. And so I used the various reports that the back office system gave me to discover imbalances or unallocated trades so that I could rectify those before the day's opening every day. I used to come in at between 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. And by the time the sugar markets opened, I'd done all my out trades. I was still getting calls from other people. So that use of, shall we say, technology to fix a problem was the first one. Thereafter, I got involved in using an accounting system as a quasi back office system, which made me really understand what the difference between accounting systems and back office systems were. But of course, when you're trading interest rate swaps, you need a computer to be able to calculate the value of the swap pretty quickly. Not only did I have to find prices at the CME in Chicago, I also had to calculate what the implicit cost of carrying those prices would mean to me in my calculation. And in order to do that quickly, I needed to have a program. So I bought a handheld Casio 64-line computer in Wanchai for the princely sum of about $1,000 at the time for this little thing that looked like a Texas Instruments calculator. And I programmed my swap calculator in BASIC. And I figured out pretty quickly how to use a thing called inheritance code. And I only discovered what it was called a few years ago when I was talking to somebody about it who was a programmer. And I essentially figured it out and invented inheritance programming by using reusing logical steps in the short programming space I had to be able to reuse those steps multiple times without actually having to rekey data. So I could calculate an interest rate swap in a few seconds. What happened then was the brokers in Asia heard about this crazy guy Lam who was trading interest rate swaps in the Asian time zone and would call me asking me to make prices. And pretty soon I was making prices in the Asian time zone as well as in the US time zone, which meant I started work at 7 in the morning when sometimes I'd have people from the West Coast calling me in Hong Kong for prices through my brokers, or I would be trading until Fed time, which was about 11 o'clock at night in Hong Kong for 5 days a week. So Friday nights were a bust for me every week. But I would calculate these swaps, make the deals, set up my hedges in Chicago, and move on to the next trade. And so that little piece of technology gave me an edge. But at the same time, I was trading actively on CME Eurodollars into the back months, which almost nobody else was. And I was making markets in the back months in Singapore at a time when nobody was trading anything except front months in Singapore. So I got to know at that time, young man by the name of Michael Wong, who is part of Phillip Securities, or at least was. He's finally retired. Michael Wong and I would become daily collaborators in trying to figure out how to roll my interest rate swap risk on hedged with Eurodollar futures onto FRAs by making prices in the back months in Singapore Eurodollar futures, which were fungible. And so I would literally spend my mornings and afternoons Asian time making markets in back month and front month Eurodollar futures on the Simex pit, and the evenings looking for juicy deals and putting hedges on the CME. And I did that for about 1.5 years until I was invited by somebody I'd known for some years who worked for Baring Brothers to come to London and help Baring Brothers build their life operation. And I'm talking about Baring Brothers, the bank, just to be clear, not the same outfit that took them under in late 94, but in fact, the traditional bank. And I worked for the Treasury Department and the Gilt Department, which were basically being merged as part of Big Bang from 86 to 87. And I set up a floor operation, and I had quite a few people working for me on the floor at Barings, where we really focused on sterling markets, so gilts, short sterling, occasionally we'd do stuff in Eurodollars, but our primary business was doing the hedging for the gilt trading area and also for the money market desk, and keeping those in balance. And it was an exciting time. So there I spent my life on the floor during the day and the early evenings in the office, talking to various people, including Michael Baring, who was on the gilt desk and actively trading in those days. So I felt I was working for this ancient British bank, and yet they were forward-thinking enough to be involved in these markets. In early '87, I was approached by Nomura, who asked me to come and do what I basically did for Barings, but in this case on JGBs, Japanese government bonds. And so I joined Nomura in the summer, in I think June of '87, and by July of '87, we launched JGB futures. We knew everybody was going to watch us, and so I tried to hide our hand signals by coming up with a devious and clever system. I flashed the wrong order to my pit broker, Neil Trusler, and Trus starts sending me fills back, and I'm going, that was a 40 lot, not a 400 lot. Oh my God, what have I done? And in a JGB, each tick, I think at that time was worth over 150 pounds, which was a lot. And suddenly I realized we had about a 200 lot position, which we didn't want. So I snuck into the pit, whispered in his ear and said, we're going to feed this out slowly, and I'm not going to signal anything on this, and let's try and get out of it. We ended the day £50,000 up on this error. It was a valuable lesson. I literally arrived the week of the disintegration of the EMS, commonly known in the UK as the snake, where all the currencies were tied together by monetary intervention. And that fateful day in September in 1992, the snake fell apart. We had a crazy busy day. We managed to generate new business somehow. Our systems failed. But I realized that there was an opportunity in Germany, because open outcry was also going crazy. And getting fills out of the pit at that time in London, when the markets went crazy, could take you half an hour, 40 minutes, which was unacceptable. And one thing I noticed, that even when our systems were super slow, which they were, the systems I inherited from my predecessor in Frankfurt, sometimes it would take you a minute or two to see the print. And Reuters would have printed the actual trade long before my brokers knew about it. But we're talking a minute. Even with a minute, we still beat open outcry. And I said, this is it. My exposure to electronic trading in the UK up to that point had been after hours. But it became clear to me pretty quickly that if we could improve our systems in Frankfurt, we could actually take on open outcry. And so I spent the next 2.5 years developing a brokerage business in Frankfurt that basically rivaled every other FEMAT desk, and there will be some that will argue in terms of profitability, because we had 0 out trades. We knew our trades pretty quickly, and we could fill our clients immediately, which meant that the clients would come back with fresh orders more rapidly than wondering whether we had a fill. It was during that time I had to implement a back office system. And in Germany, the only choices at that time were UK-based Royal van Noden or US-based GMI. And FEMAT was a big user of GMI already, but I had to get my trades into the GMI system. And I needed to do that automatically. I wasn't going to put a GMI terminal at a desk in Frankfurt and manually punch in data that was coming electronically from the exchange. Andreas Preuss, who became the CEO of Eurex, I got to know him, and he contacted me and said, Alex, in your project, do you need a program? And I said, absolutely. I need somebody to integrate DTB to GMI, preferably somebody who knows the DTB system and who can speak English with the GMI guys, or at least read the APIs, which of course was an unknown term really in the early 90s. And he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Gary Kemp. Gary Kemp came into my offices. I gave him a desk, and he built, as far as I know, the first real-time data delivery system to GMI We used an AS400 in Frankfurt to talk to the AS400 in the US because we had lease line constraints. I think we had a skinny 16 kilobyte lease line or something like that. Maybe it was more, but I think it was only a 16 KB line. And the AS400 could communicate adequately across this line. And so we delivered the trade data using this AS400 through one API to GMI. But at the same time, we took the transaction data and dropped it into the other use this AS400 had, which was to run our German bookkeeping system, because we had to have a bookkeeping system. So we implemented a really expensive Midas bookkeeping system on the same machine that was being used to communicate our trades to the States. Unfortunately, FEMAT gave that code to GMI rather than selling it, but there you go. But at the end of the project, Gary Kemp said to me, "So Alex, because I paid him handsomely for that project, can I do anything else for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I need a better front end." Gary felt that the front end was his baby. He was involved in building Sofx. Sofx was acquired, or at least the technology from Sofx was acquired by Deutsche Terminbörse, part of Deutsche Börse, and implemented more or less in the same way that the Sofx software had been implemented. So we had trading screens that were designed for one trade at a time, one trader putting in his single order, waiting for the trade to happen, and the trade would happen, and bingo, it were done, and the trade would then be printed out on paper. What we learned as we built our successful brokerage business was that these paper printouts were impossible. So I approached Gary and I said, well, Gary said at the end of the project, can I build something for you? And I said, absolutely, I want to have a decent trading screen. He was affronted. It's a good trading screen. I said, it's great if you want to do one lot at a time. It's no good if you're a broker or an active trader, because you're too busy trying to find out what you've traded. So I gave him two drawings, basically a drawing for an order book, so we could easily filter and condense orders we were working by clients, and a drawing of a trade book that would then tell me what I traded for a client, so I could then summarize transactions. Why? We would get client orders for buy 1,500 DAX at the market when the DAX was trading, a DAX index, German stock index future, was trading maybe 3,000 in a day. So suddenly I'd get a phone call from a broker in New York who'd scream at us and go, buy me 1,500 at the market. And we go, it's going to kill the market. Shut up, just do it. So we enter the order, we buy 1,500 at the market, and we get 1,425 one lots, and the rest might be twos and threes. And then my broker would spend the rest of the day trying to figure out what the price of the execution was, because the printed PTCs just gave you a string of onesies. So these printers would, all you could hear in the dealing room, apart from the occasional scream when people were getting buried with trades, was this printer going bzz, bzz, dot matrix printer, just scrolling and buzzing and scrolling and buzzing. We had three of them, and it was just a nightmare of paper. So we lost money almost every day because of this. As soon as Gary had implemented our new Deck Alpha-based order book and fill window, we got down to zero errors, because most of our errors were not trading errors, they were execution confirmation errors, where the broker would say to the client, you bought 1,500 at this average price, which is made up of this list of trades. And then by the evening, we would realize that he'd made a mistake, and we'd either given up too many buy trades at too low a price, or too many sell trades at too high a price, and lose most of the brokerage that we'd earn through poor mathematics. These two screens, the order book screen and the fill window screen, became the basics of Trading Technologies desktop in 1993.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets Wiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.